Welcome to this new tutorial. In this tutorial, you will learn how to work with GIS, which is a free add-on, and I will of course explain how it works, but you will also learn how to animate this. So if you have some time today, I will highly suggest you just follow this and I will make sure that you will learn something. Also, all the project files from all the YouTube tutorials are on Patreon, so you can get an in-depth look in my scenes. To start this tutorial, you guys will first need to download Blender Gis. You can search this into Google, but I will also leave a link down in the description below. You can just click on code and download the zip file. Blender Gis also has its own wiki, FAQ, quick start guide, which is very handy, and flowchart. So in quick start guide is actually everything that I'm gonna tell you right now. So let's jump into Blender. And inside Blender, you want to delete the light, default cube, and camera. Now, with me, you can already see GIS here, but you guys first have to install this add-on. So go to Edit, Preferences, go into Add-ons, and click on Install. And here you can just double click on the Blender GIS master or click on Install Add-on. Now Blender GIS is one of the add-ons that you can just tick on. From my understanding, it works with Blender 2.8 and upwards, but maybe in the newest versions you will get some troubles, so you can always download an older version of Blender. With GIS, we can start working with geodata. So web geodata, and you can click on base map. We will keep it for right now at Google and satellite. Click on OK. Here we can see the world map. We can zoom in with our scroll wheel, and we can push our wheel down so the wheel click and move around. If you zoom in, it starts loading these satellite images in another zoom level. You can also draw a region. So let's say, I like Italy. I can click on B and draw this region. Then it zooms automatically into that region. But you can also look for a specific location. So just click on G, and here we can go to Amsterdam. You can also already choose a zoom level, so we can maybe do like 10. Click on OK, and here we're zoomed in on the beautiful Netherlands, Amsterdam, right? So we chose satellite. If you ever want to change these options, you can click on spacebar and go into map maybe, right? So that is also possible, and it will stay in the same position. So spacebar and then satellite or map. You can also access extra options with O, right? So zoom to mouse, lock objects, lock origin, and all of these base map options. We can export this as well, right? So we can get this texture map and height detail from just searching a particular place. So in my case, I was just looking around here, and I found this beautiful place here. So I thought, what would this look like in more of a 3D setting? Sometimes you get these little artifacts, and they will be also added to the texture map. So, or zoom in an extra level, sometimes that works, but also you can just go here, right? You can just search for another place. Often that is a bit better. What do we do when we find a nice spot? If you click on E, you get this texture map as kind of a plane inside Blender. The problem is, sometimes these texture maps are not that high quality, because we're working with a certain zoom level. So let me delete this one and get a new one. Here, bam. Probably will end up in the same spot. And what you need to know is that, I want a different zoom level, so I'm going to zoom in, which creates smaller details. The problem is, if I zoom in, then I don't have these big mountains anymore. So you stay at the place where you want it to be at. So let's say I want all of these mountains here in view. Then I'm gonna click on L, which locks my position. But look up here. If I now still zoom in with my scroll wheel, so just scroll 1, 2 times, you can see that this kind of number goes up. So this is kind of the zoom level. And you can go quite high, but I wouldn't recommend going too high, because it actually takes a lot of memory, and it needs to download it from the internet. And the highest that I went, I think, is around 1600, and 6000 just didn't really work. So once your image is ready, let's wait for 1500 right now. Right now we have reached 1500. As you can see, it also disappeared. I don't really want to touch my scroll wheel button anymore, right? Because if I'm gonna scroll up or down, it needs to recalculate that. But how do I see if this image is actually nicely detailed? Well, if you hold your control button and scroll, so once you hold your control button, you can start to scroll, you can kind of see a little bit closer up on this image and can see the detail that you have or that you can export later on. If you release the control button, it just snaps back. This way you don't need to re-download anything, right? If you're happy with your result, you click on E to extrude. In this case, it is exporting, but normally we are extruding with E, right? So it's E to export your image. Now we have our image, and now we can start working on this image. The first thing that we want to do with this image is actually create this height detail. How do we do this? Also, this is done with GIS. Go to Web Geodata and get the elevation map. So click on this, and here we have different servers. marinegeo.org often works the best, so click on OK. The other ones might work in lower versions of Blender. Two modifiers have been added to our modifier stack. We have a subdivision surface and a displacement map. This is all because we have added this elevation map. So what influences this elevation map? I personally think the servers could have an impact, but I can only reach this marine geo. I am not sure why, maybe it's my version of Blender, or maybe the other servers just don't work. Of course, the zoom level also matters. If you're very far away from Earth, the mountains don't look that high. Or if you're very much zoomed in, of course you also don't see those big mountains, right? Then you're just in maybe a city or a field. What should we do to make this more impressive? We can always go to the displacement map and just put the strength higher, let's say 5. Now we get some very cool little mountains here, but the water might look weird in some places. So how do we prevent this from happening? There are loads of ways to do this, and I'm gonna show you guys 2 ways. First of all, always keep in mind that a high subdivision level gives you nice details, but it also slows down your PC. So if you don't want that, you should put it a bit lower. Now, I want to show you guys the first way to edit this. I'm gonna do it with Vertex Groups. So just go into the top view. We first need to apply our subdivision surface. And I'm going to make this a little bit smaller just so I can explain it a bit quicker to you guys and apply this. Go into top. And now for me this is a black screen. If you zoom in though, you can see a little bit more of this map underneath. Or if you zoom out, you can also see it a bit better. Now with C, we can select certain parts of this map here. And here you want to select only the parts that you don't want to have any displacement upon. So you can zoom very much out, too far away though, and it will not select them. Or you can go quite close by and see the map underneath. So this is a little bit annoying, like you have to put in some time to do this. But it will, you will get great results from this, okay? So what happens now is we're gonna go into the object data properties and create a new vertex group. This we can just rename to no displacement and then assign it. So go back to the modifiers and we will go into object mode. So just stop. Here inside the displacement modifier, we have a little option called vertex group. We now can select the no displacement, and here we can see that it is kind of flipped around. Only here, where we actually have our vertex group, is displaced, so we can flip this. And now you can see that there's no displacement here, but the displacement everywhere else is still working. This technique is quite good, okay? So I really like this one. There's also another one. For that one, we first need to apply a displacement map, then go into sculpting. So, with sculpting you can see, hey, I cannot see my map. Why is this? This is because this map has a ridiculous scale. If you go into item, you can see that it's just, yeah, ridiculous, right? So if we scale this down to, let's say, maybe 500 meters, then click on Shift C, so we're all the way back at it. And if we now go to sculpting, you can see that we actually can finally see our model. And here we can smooth these parts out. So you can go to the smooth brush here, or you can hold Shift and smooth this out. So I would probably put the strength quite high and then just smooth this part out. You can always click on the material preview to actually look at the materials and see whatever you're smoothing out here. So you can combine these techniques or only use one of them, but you can see that both of them have some great results if your height maps are just not really what you want to and you want to make it a bit more extreme, let's say. So that is essentially it. Let's go on and create the other parts for this animation. Go to Layout and create a camera. Then this camera can be moved. So we can just go click on 0, go into View, Camera to View, zoom out, and here we can look at a particular spot. So yeah, maybe from here it will look cool. Doesn't matter, whatever you think looks cool. Then grab your camera, and I personally did a bit higher focal length. So maybe 80, 90, or even 100. Just made it look quite cool in my opinion. And around here would look awesome. Make sure you tick this off, and now your camera will stay in this position. For this animation, we need multiple objects. So let's create a cylinder. So mesh cylinder, make it a bit bigger. I'm gonna go back to my camera view, and you can always scale it a bit up. And with G Shift Z, you can move it around without it moving around the Z axis. So maybe we'll start around here. Let's also give some modifiers to this cylinder. So go to modifiers, add a bevel. Let's do a segments of 3 or 4 and put them a bit closer together. And also a subdivision surface. We can also put this a bit higher and right click to shade smooth. So what do we do here? Well, we're gonna select our landscape, click on Shift D to duplicate it and hide one of these duplicates, okay? Then select the one that is active and use another modifier, which is the Boolean Modifier. As object, we're gonna select this cylinder. Now, if we hide the cylinder, you can see that we have a hole here. Perfect. We're gonna do exactly the same for the unedited landscape. Select it, add modifier, Boolean. Again, select the cylinder, but now you want to, instead of difference, click on intersect. And now you will only have this little part. For both of these landscapes, we can apply the Boolean. And if you're happy with it, you can also delete the cylinder. Then, with each one of these maps here, these landscapes, we can go into edit mode, select this inner ring, and alt-clicking somewhere around here, at one point it will just end up selecting the whole inner edge loop. I'm not sure totally how or why it works, but yeah, sometimes it just works perfectly like that. So just alt and then click until it reaches this whole inner circle. Then extrude around the Z axis and then scale Z 0. Then extrude, scale a little bit down, extrude once more, and then click on M, add center. We can always get an extra edge loop and just put it here to the top, so it's nice and sharp, and also here in the bottom if we want to. Perfect. We're gonna do the same for this little piece here. So just select this outer edge loop again. So just alt click, and at one point it will just select it. Then extrude Z, scale Z 0. I'm gonna make sure I grab my other one so I can see how deep I have to go. A bit deeper, somewhere around here. Hide the other one. Extrude, scale down, extrude, M, add center. Create some extra edge loops here. This one and this one. And now we can create some better looking materials. So what do we need to do to create better looking materials? First of all, I want to get rid of these weird shading artifacts. So let's hide this other one for right now. So just like this. Go into Object Data Properties and use Normals. Let's put the Normals on and right click and shade smooth this model. So in the auto smooth is set at 30 right now. And you can see that we still get some flat shading also in here, and we don't want that. So let's put this auto smooth up to like 60. That seems to work way better. And let's do the same for this part here. So auto smooth around 60 will be fine. And now let's jump to the shading. As you can see, we already have 2 of these nodes here, but that is not all that I want. I want a bit more. Also, I want a different material for this piece here, right? So how do we create this? First of all, you can render inside Eevee or inside Cycles. That is up to you. I personally like Cycles way better, but Eevee is of course way quicker. Now, let's add some lighting as well. I like to add a nice sun in here, and you can rotate the sun. Let's do something like this to create some more interesting shadows. And we can put the strength, of course, also a bit higher, just to see what works for you. You can, of course, also add an Hdri map. So you can just go to World, add an Environment Texture, and open your Hdri. You can download this Hdri in the description down below. It's for free, so don't worry. And let's put the strength to 0.3, a little bit lower. And now we can really start to edit this material. So go back to Object. And inside this material, I want to put the specular down. We don't really need any reflective mountains, right? Now, what more do we want to add here? Well, personally, I like a nice bump map to make these little details even more impressive. So we're gonna create a bump node. Normal goes into normal. And for this bump node, we need a grayscale map. If we look at this model here, or this texture, you can see that this is not a grayscale map. So I'm going to use a color ramp, put this image into the color ramp, which creates a nice grayscale map. And then this color goes into the height of the bump map. And here we can see that if I put the strength low or high, that we have a big difference in these details. So yeah, you can just choose whatever you want. Don't go too high, maybe 0.7 or 0.6. Also, of course, depends on your scene. But this already looks way, way better. Now, if you want to get even more of this detail, you could also just accentuate these details in the color map itself. So if you use a mix RGB, mix the color ramp, which is black and white, right? So that's the grayscale map, with the normal color map, put it at multiply, and now you can see that I can make these details a bit more extreme, just with the colors, right? So maybe don't put it too high, like 0.1, because it will also darken your colors, and we don't want them to be too dark, right? So these are some cool techniques to make this a little bit more interesting. What about this material? How do we even create 2 materials on the same model? Just go to Material, Properties, click on plus to create a new material, and here we can create, of course, a new material. We're going to use the base color. I'm just do orange in this case, and put the roughness at 0.8. Then we can go into Edit mode, select this middle vertex, click on Ctrl plus to expand your selection all the way until it reaches this end. Then assign this material to those vertices. Awesome, so now we have 2 different materials. We can do the same for this one here. And what you can see is that these already had the same material, so the material already looks good on top. Click on plus. We can select our same little orange material, then go into Edit mode, select this middle vertex, click on plus until it reaches the end here, and then click Assign. Awesome, and that is essentially it. So now we can go on and start to animate this. To animate this, I would like to go inside Animation. Then we have here our camera view. And here we have our whole view here. So we can just select everything and we can see whatever happens here on screen. So what do we want to do here? First of all, I want to work inside the timeline. And the main purpose of this animation is for this model to go up and down, right? I also like it to rotate. And you can see that if I rotate it right now, it goes quite weird. That is because the origin of this model is not in the middle of the model itself. And we will also have problems with that once we will go and animate it. So go into edit mode, select everything from this model with A, Shift S to do cursor to selected, and what you want to do now is go into object mode, object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. So now if you rotate it, it will rotate from the middle, which is of course where this 3D cursor is. So our animation starts at frame 0. Let's click on I and do location, rotation. Then you can choose however long you want this to take, but let's say around frame 60, this is going to move up. And we can see here how far we want it to move up. So maybe to around here. I, location, rotation. Then from frame 60 to let's say frame 100 for right now, I want this to rotate 360 degrees around the z-axis. So rotate z 360. I, location, rotation. So what you can see here is rotates. And then we want it to fall down again. Also this you can do in two ways. You can just animate it that it goes back, or you can just render these 100 frames and then put them in a program like Premiere Pro, or you can also do it inside Blender, and then you're gonna play them just normal, and you're gonna play it backwards after that. So it plays like this, goes up, rotates, and then plays backwards. This is very handy, especially if you work with cycles, right? You don't want to render another 100 frames. So I use this technique quite a lot in these small little motion graphic animations. So let's do 100. And yeah, I do think this rotation goes a bit extremely quick. But what we can do is we can start to edit these parts right now. Go into the graph editor here. And here we can see that all of our animations or our keyframes have lines, right? And the ones that we really animated will have a Bezier curve added to it. So it's nice and smooth. We can still edit these. So let's say the rotation that we had, which was the Z rotation, starts at frame 60. But let's say I don't want it to start at frame 60. I might want to move this around. So G, X, you can just move it around 20 frames before. Also this here, with Control and middle mouse button click, you can kind of scale this up and down. This works the same as a timeline. So you can see that from 0 to 100, but I can also click on here and press space to play this as the timeline. And you can see that now it starts already rotating once it still goes up. You can even do it earlier if you want, so maybe around here. Let's play, and here it already starts to move. So this looks a little bit more fluid to me. Very nice. This model, however, though, when it goes up around the Z location, it just stays very stationary. And I personally like if it starts to look like it's a bit floating. So how do we do that? Well, when you use the Z location, we can also add modifiers to this location and to this curve itself. So go to modifiers and add a noise modifier. We need to put the strength a bit higher to see what is happening, but you can see that the line now has this noise applied to it. And what will happen, it will move like this. It doesn't really look fluid yet, but if we just put the scale way up, you can see that it starts to look like it's a bit floating here, right? So yeah, it's important to put the scale up and play around with the strength, because too much strength also just looks off. And you can see here that we have this very cool little floating animation. Now, I don't want it to start already at frame 0, right? It just looks weird when it just starts to bump up and down. So we could restrict frame range. And what we can do here is we can create or apply a start and an end to this modifier. So I want our noise to start later in our animation. I am just going to put my strength a bit up and put the scale down just to see what is happening here. So what is happening is if we put this start up, you can see that it starts later on with this noise. So let's say I want this noise to start around frame 60. This end frame can just be like 100, but it doesn't really matter, so you can also keep it a bit higher. There is also a blend mode, because if we don't blend this, you will see that in this case, it just starts to, it will just dip down very quickly. That just looks very weird, alright? So you can blend this and it will smoothly transition to this noise. Of course, my strength and skill were way off because I just wanted to show you guys what is happening. But if I put this a bit more down, you can see that right now it just goes up. It doesn't have any of the noise movement in between, but here it just slowly starts to get that animation. So that is essentially the animation. I did the same for these little spheres that fell down in my end animation. And what I also did is I created also another noise pattern for the Y rotation. So we have a little bit of this rotation going on. So if you select the Y rotation, add a noise to it, you can see that now it looks a bit clunky, but we're gonna do exactly the same as before. Let's put the restrict frame range to start at 60 and end at 120. We're gonna blend it a bit in, and we will play around with the scale, right? So scale and strength can be played around with. So what will happen now, it will not only go up and down, but also the Y Euler rotation will move a little bit. I hope you guys understand what I'm doing here. It works way better when this last animation takes way longer, by the way. So if we select these, then just move them a little bit more backwards, because it has some more time to float around. So that is kind of how I made this animation. Let's look in our rendered viewport shading. And here we can see our final result. So I hope you guys learned from this, and I'm really curious what you guys are gonna come up with. So please tag me in your renders or whatever you're gonna create. And I would also like it if you could like and subscribe, because it will help me out a lot, but probably you as well. Because the more subscribers I have, the more incentive I have to actually upload more tutorials for free. So, thank you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.